SpaceX just officially filed for its IPO with a target date of around the middle of June, and also a target raise, guys, this is insane, of at least $75 billion at a valuation as much as $2 trillion, a $2 trillion valuation. This will be most likely the most hyped, the biggest and most just insane IPO in the history of the stock market. There's lots of crazy terms getting thrown around, like orbital data centers, bases on the moon, cities on Mars. And in this video, I just want to cut through all the noise and talk about what is important to know as a retail investor for this IPO. And I want to discuss if I plan on buying shares of SpaceX when they hit the market, and what that would look like in my own personal portfolio. So let's get right into it and start from the top. I want to talk about kind of the mission of the company in general, the different segments that make up the umbrella of SpaceX, then the financial performance, talk about maybe the opportunity that really is there for the company, and then dive into, you know, my own personal plan with it and my own portfolio. So if you think SpaceX is just a rocket company, you're wrong. What is the mission of SpaceX in general? Okay, and this is at the pretty much the top of the filing that they released under our mission. Our mission is to build the system and technologies necessary to make life multiplanetary, to understand the true nature of the universe, and to extend the light of consciousness to the stars. Which sounds, it sounds pretty good, right? That sounds cool. It sounds like the beginning of a good sci-fi movie, which is interesting. So what does it actually mean, though, in terms of like what's underneath the hood, what's under the umbrella of SpaceX? There are three core different segments that really make up SpaceX. Two of them are unprofitable, one's profitable, and two of them are essentially made to fuel one of them, if that makes sense. We'll get into it. Okay, so the first one that I want to talk about is space. And this is exactly what you probably think it is. Like, yes, they are a rocket company. They're not all a rocket company. But when you think of SpaceX, you think of them launching rockets and landing them and catching them somehow. But this is the space segment, right? So they have had actually a pretty incredible run as a space company. And it's just such a hard industry to get into with such high barriers to entry, and it's a very, very capital-intensive type of industry to work in. And they've been the first for a lot of things, right? Like they were the first liquid-fueled rocket to reach orbit by a private company, the first private company to dock on the space station, the first private company to propulsively land an orbital-class booster, that shit is crazy. I know everybody here has seen it, but it's still kind of crazy to see. I've never seen it in person. I would love to, but and then also refly that class booster. And so some of the highlights in this segment involve the guys. They launch a lot of rockets, right? Like they have around 650 total launches. Missions flown with one or more reused boosters is 85%, which is really where they've kind of cracked the code and where they've brought new ideas to market and really made new things happen, right? Is like that being able to reuse boosters dramatically drops the cost of being able to do this so that they can actually have more launches. And the more launches they have, the more they can get paid. So that part of it is really, really impressive, right? And then percentage of 2025 global mass to orbit is 80%. That's honestly just an insane number. And then crew members flown is around almost 80. So this is like, even though the space segment, which we'll get into, it's not a profitable segment, the way they do make money with it is on these launches, right? Like they're either putting satellites into orbit for the government, for the military, for private or corporate telecommunications companies, or they're bringing resources to space stations, or they're bringing crew members up for NASA. Like they have contracts with NASA. And that's kind of what this segment of SpaceX is made up of. And the next one is connectivity. And simply put, this is Starlink. There's a lot there, but Starlink is such a phenomenal business, and it is the one that, makes the most money for SpaceX, that they use that money to fuel the other segments. But it's such an incredible business, guys, and it's just, yeah, it's really, I find Space or Starlink to be a really, really cool opportunity. And honestly, if it was its own standalone company, I'd probably be buying shares. But they were the first to, really begin deploying a large scale, low Earth orbit, broadband satellite constellation, which there's a lot of like terms in there, but basically they have a lot of satellites that provide internet. And that's essentially what Starlink is, right? And then some of the highlights here are they have almost 10,000. They're getting close to 10,000 satellites in orbit, which is a lot of goddamn satellites. And then they have over 10 million subscribers to Starlink, and it operates in about 164 countries. So it's a massive company. Personally, I've never actually used Starlink. I've never had to. But I've heard lots of people that have, and they've had, good things to say. It works really, really well. I think, here we go. It's a cool company. It's a great idea. It fills its own gap in the market, right? That people need when they go on road trips, when they're out of town, when they're out in the middle of nowhere and they need internet. It's perfect for that. And then it also kind of just fits in with the whole SpaceX theme, right? Like everything, that's one thing I do like about SpaceX is like each segment makes sense and each segment kind of helps the other segment grow. Now, the next one is their AI segment, and this is definitely by far the most controversial segment. This is going to be your XAI, your X, your Grok. That's kind of what all lives in here. It's relatively new. So it's like 2023 is when it kind of really started getting formed. And for being that new, I mean, you can cut them some slack in the sense of like you can't have everything figured out like that. And I know they've gone through some organizational challenges, let's call it, where a lot of the early starters and early founders don't even work at the company anymore. Yeah, you can dig further into that if you want, but it's been one of the more controversial sides of the business, right? And this is where Grok lives. And obviously, I think Grok is like a high-performing model, and it's obviously a competitor to OpenAI and Anthropic. But when you hear Grok, OpenAI, and Anthropic all in a sentence, like Grok is way behind both OpenAI and Anthropic, right? In terms of like corporate adoption, like I don't think many corporate organizations at the enterprise level are really leveraging Grok that much. So I think it's more targeted towards that individual consumer who plays around with models, and you're just competing with giants here, and hence why the AI segment of SpaceX is not not the most profitable. In fact, it's not profitable, and there's more controversy there. Obviously, it's an Elon Musk tech company, but I do think like there's pros and cons with that, right? Like you're going to attract some of the top talent in the world, and that's one thing that I can confidently say about SpaceX is the best engineers in the world want to go work there. It's a gold standard for technology companies. And when you are that, you attract the best talent. And when you attract the best talent, you're able to deliver on the mission as an organization. Now, to take a look at the financial performance of SpaceX and the different segments, it's interesting to look at because we've never actually really gotten a look under the hood at SpaceX because obviously it's been a private company. But total revenue in 2025 was $18.6 billion. With a total loss of $5 billion. Okay. And this is just like when you hear that, and then you also hear that they're aiming to raise at a $2 trillion valuation. And in the last year, they lost $5 billion. That's where it's kind of like, it kind of seems a little bit ridiculous, right? Just based off those numbers and the multiple that the valuation would be at to top line revenue. It's like it would be trading at over 110 times top line revenue to get to their valuation, which is like it's just an insanely overvalued proposition, right? But I also understand that there's lots of opportunity here. They're chasing something that nobody else really is, and the addressable market, it can be and might be huge. But all that said, they lost $5 billion last year total as a company, and only made $18 billion. When you look at a lot of other companies are making way more than that. At the top line, and they're actually profitable, and they're worth nowhere near $2 trillion. Now, to look at the financials on a little bit more of a broken down basis by segment, this just talks about, again, in 2025, we generated revenue on a consolidated basis of $18 billion. And then here is where it breaks down the different segments. So in 2025, our space segment generated $4 billion. Loss from operations of $657 million. This is the connectivity segment, and in our connectivity segment, primarily driven by Starlink, generated revenue of $11 billion. This was for the full year, I believe. Millions, representing year-over-year growth. So that's the connectivity segment is by far, like, they make the most money, and it's actually profitable. Right, income from operations is $4.4 billion, representing year-over-year growth of 49.8%, respectively, benefiting from subscriber growth, increasing enterprise adoption, and continued improvement in network efficiency. So not only is it like, and this is what's exciting about Starlink, right, is it's growing at a pretty impressive rate. A 49.8% growth rate that's massive. Right, like go look at any other growth rates, like year over year, quarter over quarter for companies. If you're putting up 50% growth numbers on the board anywhere, that's impressive. And for the AI segment, they just acquired it, I believe. And even though it was still obviously an Elon Musk company, but he just kind of combined everything under one umbrella. For the 3 months ended. In 2025, our AI segment generated revenue of $3.2 billion, loss from operations of $6.3 billion. So AI is definitely taking, a lot of the hit. I think they're putting a lot of money into like research and development in that segment because it's newer. They're trying to get it really spun up. And obviously, they're trying to compete with some of the big dogs in that arena, like OpenAI and Anthropic. Here's another one that I find pretty interesting, just in terms of capital expenditures. They're dumping a lot of money into the business, like in their space segment, $3.8 billion, connectivity, $4 billion, so basically $4 billion in each of those. And then their AI segment, they're dumping almost $13 billion for a total capex of around $20 billion, which I mean is relatively small when you compare it to like Meta and Google and those types of companies in terms of their capex. I remember looking at capex numbers that were in like almost 70, 80, 90, $100 billion. But it's SpaceX. Going to Mars is going to take a lot of money, right? I think there's no getting around that. It's a very asset-heavy business model, and it's not like SaaS, where it's just like there's a SaaS component of it. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is sell a lot of hardware with Starlink, which is higher cost of goods sold, and then obviously sending rockets is very expensive, especially with the price of fuel these days. But there's a pretty incredible opportunity with SpaceX. And what I would say is if it IPOs and if it does hit that trillion or multiple $2 trillion valuation mark, if they deliver on the promises of, orbital data centers, if they get Starlink to be, a $20 billion a year company, which if they continue on growth rates, they definitely can do that. Maybe even more than that, right? Especially as they go into and build into that enterprise side of it. So if they're able to deliver on that, if they put a base on the moon, if they actually get a city on Mars, guys, this is going to be a $10 trillion plus company. And who knows what the time horizon of that is? It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, it could be 15 years, it could be 5 years. Like, I don't really know. I don't think anybody can really know that. I know we're putting. I think probably the first thing that will happen is we're gonna get stuff on the moon, and the orbital data centers. That's probably going to be what happens first on the roadmap. I think in this filing they talk about they want to start putting up satellites to do AI processing powered by the sun in 2028. So that could be something that actually starts to get delivered. But there is value here, right? Like the valuation of $2 trillion is kind of fucking insane. But at the same time, out of any company, it makes the most sense for that valuation and that type of multiple off of their top line revenue. And considering they're just not profitable at all, it would be SpaceX. Because like I said, if we end up on Mars, this is going to be a $10 trillion company. And that's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong. They might crash and burn and run out of money, but they're going to go through this massive liquidity event, right? They're doing this massive raise. And also shout out to the early investors in SpaceX. Y'all are getting rich. Y'all are getting super rich in the next few weeks. So unfortunately, I was not a private equity investor in SpaceX. But in terms of my own personal portfolio, like, first of all, guys, we hit 150K. First time I've seen 150 at the front of the total value in the portfolio. I do think I would add a small position of SpaceX. Basically, like I have a company called MDA. These guys it's a space company. They build satellites and electronics in space, but it's a company that's nowhere near really the hype and level of SpaceX, and it also gives me much different exposure into, like, even though it's the same industry, I don't think MDA is planning on going to Mars. So even having a little bit of my portfolio, even if it's incredibly overvalued, right? And this is how you make yourself safe. Guys, do not YOLO all of your money into SpaceX, okay? If you hate Elon Musk, if you hate SpaceX, first of all, don't buy the IPO if you don't want to. But if you want to take advantage of the opportunity that is there, I would recommend adding a small percentage, right? And a percentage of money that's not going to kill you if it ends up going to zero. Because I could see this IPO like spiking and then crashing and then kind of going into a steady state for a couple of years until we really start to see some of the things that they talk about materialize. But I think, like, obviously I have the time horizon that I can hold SpaceX shares for like 20 years. And I just wouldn't, I would advise against making it a core holding. Because I just, when I look at my own risk tolerance, like, I like to be diversified, obviously. Like, I hold a lot of money in just a S&P 500, ETF. And then amongst my big stocks, like, I have Costco, AMD, Google, Caterpillar, a space company, Meta. Like, I am relatively diversified, and that's how I'm going to continue to invest. And that's what my strategy is. And it's worked out pretty well up until now. So what I would say is I could see myself adding a small position, depending on what the share price is. At least I would allocate, maybe a few $1,000s to it at the IPO. I haven't fully decided on that, but I am leaning towards that, especially after doing a lot of research and thinking about making this video. It's just like it's what I said. I think there's a lot of hype around it, and if they end up delivering, it will be a $10 trillion company, no doubt in my mind. Maybe even more. So that's what I kind of think about when it comes to SpaceX right now. It's new news. If you are an investor, I would highly recommend paying attention to this, because it's going to be, a pretty historic IPO in the market, and you could see some things that we've never seen before. And I lived through the SPAC days, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there also lived through the SPAC days. So, and the SPAC boom of like 2021, 2022 of these crazy IPOs with crazy valuations. Maybe some of you guys even lived through the dot-com bubble. That was a bit before my time, but I understand what happened. And history sometimes repeats itself. So Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you got any value out of that video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I just make completely transparent videos talking about how I invest in the market, and what I think, and I completely obviously share my portfolio. So if you want to stay updated on the market, if you liked the content on SpaceX today, then yeah, subscribe to the channel, follow along. Let's build our portfolios together, build a community of like-minded investors, long-term investors. We don't day trade here. And that's all I got to say for today. Thank you so much for watching again, and have a good one. Peace.